you're encouraging 55 plus years old female to have babies so that you can get your birth rate right.
That's how we'll know the robots are really taking over, when they rebel around the mahjong table. Come on, British food has amazing culinary status. It may not be famous, but it definitely exists. Hello, and welcome to the Hot Pot Table. In dynamic markets that can change overnight, yesterday's strategy just doesn't cut it. I'm Jonathan Travers-Smith, CEO and founder of Hot Pot, a strategic agency with a difference. Commercial and operational success in Asia is built into our DNA. Join us as we peel back the layers of China and the wider Asia region, separating the hype from real opportunities. From consumer shifts to policy updates, this is your essential briefing on what matters right now. So pull up a seat and join us at the Hot Pot Table. Joining me this week is Fan.
Hi, I'm Fan. I'm account director at Hot Pot China, and I'm from the region that brings you Hot Pot, Chengdu.
And Adam.
Hi, Adam Sanza, head of commercial strategy.
Great to have you with us. So without any further ado, let's crack into topic one, which this month is family policy. So there are numbers that have everyone worried in China, with births hitting a historic low of 7.9 million last year versus 11 million deaths. The state's really moving now from simple encouragement to some fairly radical interventions to try and turn the tide on the birth rate. So Fan, we're seeing some pretty creative state policies here. To begin with, what are those policies, and help us understand exactly what the government are trying to do?
I think this is always, because it's always amusing already. Let's start with the most recent one, which is like the reason that caught our attention. So the news was right now the government and also the healthcare system is providing free pregnancy after you know you're pregnant, and then so the checkups that you go take during the pregnancy, those are free. For who? For retiree. And then and just to remind you, that the retirement age of female in China is, I think, 55 years old. Maybe there's a difference in different region, but still 55 years old. Because it's a culture that people believe that once you pass 35 years, then you are so-called high risk pregnancy type. And then so yeah, and then this can be read, and also this was read by the public, and then saying that, oh, you're so crazy right now. You're encouraging 55 plus years old female to have babies so that you can get your birth rate right. And then I think they even panicked, and they even apologized. They're like, no, that's not what we mean. We just say that we want to take care of you no matter what age. But still, yeah. It was read wrong. So it sounds, it sounds encouraging. It sounds like, especially in this society, in this culture, when a government gives you benefit, of course, usually there's a purpose behind it. And then so people were quite bizarre about how they chose to do it. And then they realized, oh, it can be read wrong as pushing people to have more babies. So they're like, oh, no, we're just caring.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the reasons why people aren't having more babies is the economic pressure in China has grown over the last, decade. And so what was like, I can now afford to have more children, is now I can't remotely afford to have more children. A, I'm working all the time, and B, it's kind of really expensive. So reducing or getting rid of the one-child policy didn't really have the desired effect.
Before, it was just for the second or the third child. And right now, even the first child, like there are some kind of financial beneficial but it's remotely from enough. And that's what actually backfired and then pissed people off a little bit, because I think it's a few thousand kuai. And that's nothing. That's not even enough for diapers, right? I don't have a kid. I cannot speak for that. But I assume it's not going to be enough for, let's say, 3 years supply of diapers.
Right. And certainly not enough to overturn the overall economic difficulties that you have in having more than one child in China. But yeah, it's a nice piece of PR, and it shows the population they're being taken care of. So what else have the government been doing? Because I think it gets even more creative than that.
Yes, and that's why I think it all started with I would say, like, how far the decision makers are away from actual daily life. Because I think it all started with before, they all think that the birth rate is low because the marriage rate is low. So somehow, like, they put a link, which of course naturally there are some truth to it, but so that's why actually pushing for marriage rate was the first step. And then so you can see that suddenly all the TV shows or like all of those movies are saying that, oh, marriage is wonderful and you should get married. And then and you have to understand it's a society that you cannot be in a relationship or you cannot date a guy in all the way up until high school. And then suddenly you're in college and then everyone starts to ask you, when do you get married? Right. And then so it's not a very healthy view looking at relationship or like romance life, but that's where they came from. And then so they're like, oh, we need to push people to get married. And then that didn't work out. But also there are some creative ways there. So number one is that they collaborated with a nightclub in Shanghai. And then you can get married in the nightclub. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a nice stunt for the nightclub. So I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it's just suddenly very Vegas, you know.
Is that sort of a sort of slightly less in touch with youth culture government official going, what do young people like? They like nightclubs and clubbing. We want them to get married. Put the two together and hope that that works.
Yeah, yeah. And then actually, so you can tell that some people are only thinking of KPI in the back end, right? Like it's like, okay, we don't care. We just want the marriage rate goes up this year. We want more numbers on the papers. And another example is that somebody was really creative in the systems before they were focused on marriage rate, and so marriage rate was low. And then somebody realized that in my grandparents' time, people, when they get married back then, they didn't register it at the government. So all of them are what's it called, like societally married, but legally they did not have the marriage paper. And then they were like, great, one way to hit the KPIs. So they moved the marriage center like into a portal thing and then go to compound by compound and then knock on the door of those like slightly older generation and it's like, hey, do you have a marriage license? And they're like, no. And then they say, oh, let's just go downstairs. Let's get your marriage paper. And then here is a dozen of egg and some milk and some oil.
I love it. Do you want to get married today? Yeah, sure. Crack on.
And let's just go downstairs. Let's get your marriage paper to a 60 or 70 years old. And then what's so genius about that one is because those couples, they didn't have their marriage paper. That means their sons and their daughters also don't have the birth certificate, because back then the system was not very like well documented. And so in one day you get this couple to get documented as married, and then their 40 years old son or 35 years old son or daughters can go get their birth certificate. So the birth rate also goes up according to that year's number. So KPI wise, it's creative.
Well, look, I think every marketing guru knows that there are some brands or organizations that put the numbers ahead of what actually is moving the needle. You have to admire the creativity. I love that. Actually, I would love to have got married in a nightclub, but I'm not target market in China at this point. I guess, Adam, it's really interesting is when we turn that into the world of brands, so much is written, like far too much is written about Gen Z in China and the younger generations, because, everything that's new and flashy and innovative, they are the next generation in China. Have brands got it wrong? There's a silver economy. And at what point does a brand have to kind of actually pivot its strategy to say, actually, the elderly audiences have money to spend, let's look at targeting them? Or do they just not do that because it's not cool enough?
Yeah, I think about this quite a lot. And in the West, we say youth is wasted on the young. I think we could probably say that growth and investment is wasted on the young in China. And you can understand why brands have gone after that glamorous generation. But the reality is, if you look at demographic maths, Jonathan, the numbers you mentioned, the 2 million decline in the population. But actually, if you look at that 50 plus demographic, you're looking at a 10 million increase, more or less. So you're talking about probably the only growing demographic in China. And if I'm looking at it, as I always do from a commercial perspective, I'm thinking of, when we think about targeting consumers, we think about two real metrics: CAC, cost of acquisition, and lifetime value, LTV. When you think about those Gen Z consumers, you've basically got hundreds, thousands of brands targeting perhaps a few million consumers, and they're so overwhelmed. They don't want to listen to your message. And if they do, how likely is it that they're going to actually engage or purchase your products? Whereas with this silver economy, silver generation, 50 plus, you have probably the demographic that A, is growing fast, B, probably has the highest level of disposable income, and C, is absolutely desperate to spend. And they are being neglected. Brands are just not targeting them in a meaningful way. And I think that that's a real miss. And brands that are going to succeed in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years are going to have to switch targets. And I think when you think about what that means, I don't necessarily think that means overhauling your brand messaging or overhauling your product line. You're not going to target 50 plus people with, I don't know, walking sticks, for example.
Careful, Adam. Careful. I'm worried about when I tick over into the silver surfer generation, but I'm not on walking sticks yet. But no, I get your point.
I would look at them as experienced youth. Like, I don't know, Fan, it'd be interesting to hear about your parents and what they're looking for. But when I speak to my Chinese friends and colleagues, you know, they're young, these people, and they're young at heart, and they want a Lululemon yoga pant. Okay, maybe the fit needs to adjust or the messaging around them needs to adjust, but not a dramatic overhaul. Who do you think's buying the Lululemon down jackets right now? I bet there's a healthy proportion of 50 plus consumers in there. So yeah, I really do believe that this demographic is going to be critical going forward.
Yeah, I think we've seen a major rise in spend on intangible experiences. So travel, you know, this is a generation that, you know, they've put the hard work in, they've retired, and they are looking to get the most out of life. So there's huge moves into the market, you know, almost 5 years ago now, into sort of elderly living, you know, really wonderful experiences for people sort of 60, 70 plus as they retire, great communities. That's been a big growth area in China. But also just the adventurous spirit of these people, you know, they're ready to travel. And you see the tour groups, not just within major tourist sites in China, but also outside of China increasingly. And often that comes with, at the affluent level, someone that's got an amazing Canon or Nikon or Zeiss camera, and they're capturing this, they've got new hobbies. So it's really interesting. It's, you know, we can talk about population shrinking, which if things continue, it will. But for CMOs and CEOs, it's like, how are you realigning your strategy? Certainly, you shouldn't be reinventing yourself if you're a youth-focused brand. I don't think Palace Skateboards have got Silver Surfers as their next target market. Who knows? But yeah, something that has more broad appeal, like a Lululemon, Canada Goose. You know, these brands have attractive target markets in that demographic. Just thinking about that, you know, we've seen the population, you know, shrinkage. So I think 8 million births versus 11 million deaths is a 3 million, you know, delta. So that's kind of 0.25% of the Chinese population. People are saying that the rate of decrease may increase to 0.5%. And I just did a little bit of maths before coming on, and I can't take credit for this. Google can. But if you multiply 0.5% population decrease by 25 years, then it means you're going from 1.4 billion people to 1.235 over 25 years, which means 165 million people, which is a whole Bangladesh, being removed from the population over that time. Bangladesh is the 9th most populous country in the world. So, you know, to the idea of that scale for China and the change that means is quite remarkable and potentially quite scary. Is there anything that might counteract that? I mean, Fan, Adam, anything you see? It is the year of the horse. Often the zodiac sign is influential on birth rates. Do we think that might happen in the year ahead, Fan?
I don't think so. Number one is that the most favored zodiac to have is actually, I think, dragon or tiger or both. And then so because like animal wise, they're like more dominating and also like more ambitious, and also like that's the good wish that parents wants to put on their children. And another thing is that no one is just gonna have a just like, okay, let's have a baby because like this zodiac year is fine. It only works for people who already have the plans to have baby. For example, they're financially stable, they have generational wealth, and then their job is well taken care of. There are people who can help them with the baby, which is not majority of the current generation who's suitable for having baby. Whereas for this group of Chinese who the government right now is really trying to push them to have baby, it's about finance, it's about stability, it's about like can I really afford to have a baby regardless of the zodiac or the animal or I want a Scorpio baby or not. It's those problems in reality that hasn't been solved.
Yeah. I remember there were those really interesting early signs when, I can't remember, it was quite a few years ago now. Obviously, the removal of the one-child policy was the first step. And then you started to get these almost like subliminal messages where for the new zodiac year, instead of just a 2-parent pigs and a baby pig, it was 2-parent pigs and 2 or 3 baby pigs on the postage stamps. And I just kind of love that as a sort of subliminal messaging. By the way, this is our vision of what a family is, and it now includes 2 or 3 children. I don't remember the last time I was influenced by stamps, particularly in growing my family, but I just thought that's an interesting indicator that you get from the government. So I guess we need to wait and see.
Maybe the Western or the European younger generation, they react differently. They crave stability more, and so they have baby earlier than the previous generation, like you guys. But China is like, it's another extreme is right now about independence, and also it's like, it's not about how many child you allow me to have. It's about what's my self-worth and what's the right marriage, because it's not the same to get married to anyone, right? And then so it's like it's a lot of things that are right now coming into a more healthy value system, and then that needs to be aligned and also to be understood by whoever is making the policy. But I'm actually really looking forward to the next policy that they're going to come up with. I think it's going to be fun.
Surely they'll be looking at targeting those real pain points which come after birth, in terms of financial implications. I mean, having just raised 5-year-old twin boys, the cost at that stage is really expensive. You referenced nappies before. It's crazy how much we probably spend and actually still continue to spend on those. So, why not subsidize that? That would probably have much more impact. So I do wonder whether the next raft of legislation will target those areas. I completely agree with you. I don't think zodiac signs are going to have much of an impact. Again, to bring something in, choosing red packets over red lanterns is probably where many young Chinese are at.
I don't know current status, Fan, but I was just amazed how quickly Chinese women would typically return to work in China after having a baby. Obviously, there is the kind of staying seated for the month and some of those cultural areas, but some people were having babies and back at work pretty much the next day, with grandparents taking care of the children. I guess something more like a sort of Scandinavian system where the government is funding much longer shared parental leave, where it gets split between the men and the women. That's the sort of thing that might actually move the needle here. And I know we're not here to sort of predict government initiatives, but do we think societally that is something that might make a difference to these metrics?
I do think, because they are making the policy better, and they are making the process of having baby and afterwards, there are some people who can take care of your child. Let it be grandparents or daycare centers or some company, they really have good benefit, or it's the government level enforcing this on company that you have to provide good benefit for employee who just had a baby. But then that in most cases also backfired. That just triggered a lot of companies not hiring people who have planned to have baby. And actually it's illegal. But if you go to a job interview in China, a local company, the chance of being asked are going to have baby in the next 5 years is really high. And then you can sue them, but what will happen, right? Because you don't get the job. So I think this is it's not just about the policy about the pregnancy that needs to be continually optimized, but also it's about the whole working culture and also the whole working systems that we're actually very proud of, right? China speed is a thing that we're proud of, but also there's a lot of sacrifice behind it. And then so maybe because Jonathan, you just said that many Chinese female comes back to work very fast after giving birth. Number one, the reason that I can think of, even though I didn't, but I talked to my friends who had baby. Number one is that pregnancy is really boring, right? And then so it's 9 months plus 1 month月子, and then just okay, I really need to talk to people who's not just talking about baby all the time, right? So going back to the world that you feel yourself again is really important. I think that's a factor. Number two is that if you are absent from work for too long, then the chance of you getting sidelined or demoted is high. But I think this is the same everywhere. It's illegal, but people do it. Number three could be, I'm just throwing a reason that I can think of right now, which is nannies are very expensive. It's bizarrely expensive how much my cousins and they're paying for their nanny. So they have to work. Otherwise they can't afford the nannies. So it's it suddenly becomes a numbers game.
Yeah, and that's not unique to China, unfortunately, having been through that relatively recently. Feels like a while ago now, but yeah, it's a big drain on resources. This is fascinating. I could talk about this all day. I'm going to move us on because we've got a lot more to discuss. So just to wrap up some of the themes there, we would recommend that our clients and executives looking at China need to stop looking at this as a sort of demographic crisis. There used to be a dividend from cheap labor in China, and it's pivoting from that faster than possibly any other economy has ever pivoted. And what we're going to end up with is a high productivity or high value productivity economy. And the government is hoping to make more babies, but the key thing is to manage that transition to automation, high tech, and these kind of things much more smoothly. The other key takeaway that we've had in this discussion is that for global brands, that silver economy is no longer a niche. It is and can be a main driver. So if your strategy is still indexed 100% on youth culture, you may be fighting an increasingly shrinking battleground. Okay, moving on to topic 2 for this month, which is pragmatic shopping. So in China retail, the era of blind spending seems to be officially over. We're not seeing consumers stop in consumption, but what we are seeing is a massive migration towards high efficiency shopping. So where value matters often much more than the logo. Adam, when thinking about this, we were looking at some of the key supermarkets and those brands in China. I'm old enough to have lived in China at a time when you basically couldn't get decent bread from any bakery in Beijing, and it was a massive treat to go to Carrefour in Zhongguancun. It was a real luxury. And this was at a time when Western supermarkets like Carrefour were opening up. And if that happened in your neighborhood anywhere in China, that was a big deal for the urban elite. When we look at that sector, actually, we've seen Carrefour and Walmart struggle recently. But as you've seen from numerous trips and from our team on the ground, things like Sam's Club and Costco are really booming in China. Why is that? And what is it that somewhere like Sam's Club is getting right about this more rational consumption than some of the more traditional hypermarkets or other brands in the market?
Yeah, firstly, I had a very similar experience. And when I went to China for the first time, which was the 4 million populace of Ningbo, there was a Carrefour there. And I remember being quite excited that I could go and get some Western goodies there and taste of home, which I did. But the reality was it was a horrible shopping experience. There was thousands of SKUs, millions of different options for every type of product that you wanted. And whilst that may have appealed to a certain Chinese clientele, it certainly didn't appeal to me. And I think fast forward 20 years, and many Chinese consumers are probably feeling exactly the same way as I felt with all the yellow tickets that you can see on offer and the variety that's there. They're probably feeling very similarly about Carrefour and Walmart and others like that now. Looking on the other side, the likes of Sam's Club, as you mentioned, Costco, and I'd even say Decathlon in the sporting goods world, a retailer that was up 30% year on year on e-commerce last year. And they have flipped the model and really, as you say, tapping into that rational consumption. I think the key thing that they have done is they've significantly reduced their SKU count. So the number of products that they have on offer. So I read that Sam's Club now have 4,000 SKUs available. And that might still sound like a lot, but when you look at particular product categories, rather than having 50 options of soy sauce that you could buy, they have 3 or 4. And in this era of rational consumption, that support in making a quick decision is clearly advantageous. And I think that's one of the key things that they've done. The other is obviously their membership model, and you can't get into these places. I was actually with one of our clients in Costco and Sam's Club just last year, and you can't get in without a membership card. So I had to sign up to both Costco and Sam's Club, which actually, interestingly, had the advantage of being, I then had a global membership. So I was able to use what I'd acquired in the UK, for example. But they've done a really great job of building their own private label brands. So for example, in Costco, Kirkland, there's a real badge of honor and trust around that brand. And I think Chinese consumers see through their membership that is very advantageous to them. And whereas Carrefour and Walmart, whose model was very much buying lots of global brands and lots of global products, I think they suffered massively because basically the consumer could buy the same product for 20% or more cheaper online. I think that, Sam's Club and Costco have a clear advantage. And the final piece there, obviously linked to that digitalization area, I didn't realize this, but Sam's Club have 500 forward warehouses and they promise 1 hour delivery from their app. So talking about an omni-channel shopping experience, they're clearly delivering on that. And that, we talked before about the silver economy and 50 plus and families, different demographics. You have really great way of appealing to the digital natives and those that want that really strong offline experience as well. So I think they're doing a great job of appealing to those more rational consumers. You can see that in the numbers that they're generating both online and offline.
Yeah. I think you've touched on something that's really key there for like a brand in China. Obviously, different people have a take on what a brand really is made of. But in China, possibly more than anywhere else, how you deliver the customer service, returns, those kind of things is so unbelievably critical that the feedback on that process is such a huge part of your brand. It's true for every brand, but in China, it's everything. If you get it wrong, you know about it. If you get it right, then actually, the world is yours. And it surprises a lot of our clients actually when we're looking at China that used to, even 10 years ago, you could get same day cash on delivery, deliveries from what was 360 Buy at the time, now JD.com. So that part of it is really huge. So luxury is not just, or premium products are not just in the product itself, it's in the experience and how much you feel cared for as a consumer. I think also what's interesting there is that, I use that reference for Carrefour. That's when it was only a tiny percentage of the Chinese population that would go to Carrefour, would consider paying, 30 kuai for a nice croissant or the premium goods there. Now that's changed into a much bigger urban elite, over the last 15 years that have access to that. So yes, it's a premium experience, but it's an everyday premium experience for the urban elites in China, which I think is fascinating. Fan, we touched a little bit on decathlon there as well. Obviously, we're at a time where outdoor is absolutely booming, and there's a really interesting intersection of outdoor, athleisure, premium luxury brands, and it all kind of meets in the middle. So brands like Lululemon, Salomon, Arc'teryx have been doing well in the economy, but they are significantly more expensive than perhaps a product that might have the same functionality. So Decathlon and others are perhaps a more rational alternative. Is this something that's just about a purely rational consumption decision? Cheaper is better as long as the quality is there? Or is being or looking wealthy, is that going out of style with consumers? What's kind of driving that signaling of status amongst the middle classes?
Actually, I have a question for you for all of you guys before going to this topic. For Salomon and for Arc'teryx, who are their audience and who are their consumers in European market?
I know Salomon as like a go-to skiing brand. Now, I'm probably a little out of date. I don't ski that regularly. I've been a few times in my life, but I think of them as really good gloves. And if I had to think of a brand to get ski gloves, that's what I would go to. But I think they've become a significant amount trendier in the last little while and sort of tried to expand to become a lifestyle brand. Personally, that's not a reason I would buy them, but it may work for certain generations.
Yeah, obviously previously worked with Berghaus for a number of years. And I think these brands were certainly seen as upstarts back in those days. And I think they've kind of captured the imagination of a more adventurous consumer. They've brought color, they've brought vibrancy, they've brought new fabrics, new styles even to the market. And I think that has appealed to a particular type of consumer that is keen to have new and best and innovative over here.
Yeah. And Berghaus did something with, I don't know if it was both Gallagher's or just Liam Gallagher.
Yeah, very great timing for that collaboration with the rebirth of Oasis. But yeah, but Berghaus a bit more old school. Sir Chris Bonington was and remains the chairman. Still see them as a bit more of a ram brand, although apparently they've had a good couple of years. But I think Arc'teryx, Salomon, these types of brands kind of brought something new to the market. And I think they've carried that trend globally. And actually, having been in the Arc'teryx Museum in Shanghai, I do think they're bringing that vibrancy to the market as well.
So my understanding is that actually both of them are very professional brand, and as Jonathan, you said, Salomon is like the go-to ski brand, and then for Arc'teryx, what touches me about this brand is that their respect and their mission to explore and protect and respect the mountain, right? And it's always that's in the core of the brand. But take a wild guess, or because we actually have seen a lot. Who is their audience in China, or who is wearing Arc'teryx in China?
I mean, going back to our point before, is that every brand gets kind of their head turned by Gen Z and all of their new hobbies and those kind of things. So, we have privileged information about the brand, from our work. But I would say the obvious target would be younger people who are urban elites who are trying to get outdoors and show that kind of lifestyle.
And here's one missing demographic or like a group of people that actually you don't see them online a lot because they cannot be that obvious online. But RTX, the kind of like 冲锋衣, that's what we call in Chinese. It's not just RTX, but 冲锋衣, this kind of like outdoorsy jacket. And I think even everyone has it. Like my husband has one as well. And then also it's all about the functionality. But it's almost a uniform of government officials. And then so it's always like a pair. So you have a black and outdoorsy jacket, but you don't go to outdoor, you go to your office, and then with the teacup in your hand and also glasses. And then so that's your work outfit. And then simultaneously, what do you like to do? You like to take pictures with Canon, but do you know how to adjust those like numbers on the and then make the camera work? You don't. But it's just like that's the image, and also like that's a huge part of the audience that this brand attracted to in China. And so that's why the scandal that they had, I was not surprised about it because somehow it matches.
So we're referring to the taking over of the Tibetan, or was it Tibet or Qinghai?
Yes, it's Tibetan plateau. So it's and also it's a no, like quote unquote no man's land. There should not be people in that region, and then so that's why. But Chinese were funny, and when we were being critical, so they're called 始祖鸟, right? The Arctic is called like the original bird, or like the ancestress bird. That's the direct translation. And then right now they're mountain exploding bird. So 炸山鸟 is their new name.
So for anyone that missed that, this was a Arc'teryx terribly thought out marketing campaign where they partnered with an artist, and the art installation was to set off giant, colorful, extremely loud fireworks right through the pristine Tibetan plateau. Unbelievable that got approved. We could do a whole podcast on that topic, but that was, for anyone that missed it, that's the context of this.
Yeah. And so right now the brand is like being, of course, the global immediately cut tie with whatever it's doing in the local team, which I believe them that the global team really doesn't have an idea about what's going on, and that's really totally against what their belief is. But back to the topic is that like brands like this, Arc'teryx, Salomon is another example. Like the very popular item from Salomon is actually their shoes. And then also I think Salomon and On Running were pretty much the same time become very popular among younger Chinese audience. It's not that they like to go hiking or something like that. It's the look that they're looking for, but it's just a trend. Yeah. And if you don't know what's behind it, and then the trend passes, then the company would go down, or the brand would go down in China.
Well, that's really interesting. Actually, the topic that we're on is about sort of what is premium purchase or what represents luxury to these days. And so, just to use a really extreme example, the Hermes Birkin bag, is just a great, icon in luxury, but it's all about what it says about you, the cost, the wealth, the ostentatious display of sophistication. And I'm not suggesting that's exactly the same consumer here. But if you take that as one extreme, actually the move towards rational consumption is like, yes, I will still pay a decent price tag, but for something that has that functionality built in. And Fan, I think your point is really fascinating, which is the government officials that might be wearing Arc'teryx perhaps aren't climbing a mountain or aren't going out to kind of, ice caps, but it's a sign that you can afford it. You've invested in a rational decision because it's not sequined and glossy and covered in diamonds. It is a high performance item, and it sort of fits with your overall uniform in life.
So it's actually not just about that, but it's about like what is luxury, because I don't think Arc'teryx or Salomon is considering luxury in China. Not anywhere, actually. It's premium. And also, but the differentiation here is that from here in the home market, it's actually hardcore professional functional brand. And so if you're not having a hobby of go hiking or something like that, then probably you wouldn't touch it. But in China, it becomes a fashion item that is a trend that has been going on. It's like the gorecore or like the shanxi or the urban outdoor, whatever is that. Urban outdoor, seriously, like because that is a thing, right? Urban outdoor. And I was like, huh? But Chinese consumers, because when let's say in the 90s, when all the international brands started entering China, and so it was so new, you don't need to educate the audience that much. You just tell them that this is good because this is produced by craftsmanship, Italy or France or something like that. And then we enter a phase that people still like, they look less loud and less polishing stuff, but they still don't ask the question. And now we're in the phase is that the customers and audiences are so educated. We right now have old money in China, right? After generations finally. And then they would start to ask questions. It's like, okay, what am I paying for?
Mm.
Because and then so quality and then the functionality and the formality all matters. Because otherwise it's just intellectual tax, right? Like that's what we say, 智商税. And then on the other hand is it's not just the production ability of China, because we always have very high production ability. We're so-called the factory of the world. But also the brand, and also to focus on, that's how you do it. So we learn from everything that is happening, and then we can do it better and most of the time cheaper. And so that's what's the triggering. Also, I think back to I think was it in Sam's Club or in Costco. So there was a down jacket, right? And then 400, 500 kwai RMB, but the filling percentage is even higher than Canada Goose. Means that you pay 10% of the price and you get warmer. And let's be honest, puffer jacket and down jacket are just not pretty to look at. So it is a functional clothing to begin with. So that just really makes people to think, okay, I'm paying for the ingredients, I'm paying for the content in this item, and it looks okay, then it's fine.
And that's a really great point on the Chinese consumer generally. It doesn't matter where you are in history, Chinese consumers are very rational, but it's kind of, am I rationalizing the Hermes Birkin bag because it says something about me? There's value there because it signals a certain status. Sure, but there is value. It's an investment, and same with hard luxury now, right? The economy has struggled a bit more, but people are investing more and more into gold jewelry because it's a thing I can wear, I can show it off as a luxury item, and it's an investment piece. So that's kind of really critical versus just paying for the logo. And I'm going to come back to your phrase. It's the IP shui, or the kind of wisdom tax that people are seeing, and people aren't willing to pay for that anymore. Show me the functionality, make the value explicit, and then I may consider you as an option.
And also another possibility is that, sorry to say this very loud, but the design currently, like for many brands, no matter luxury or like or premium or stuff like that, it's getting a little bit boring. Because I think who was that? I think I was watching a Wall Street Journal interviewing the head of design at MS, who was working with Maison Margiela, everyone, and then she just says that the quiet luxury, and then in Chinese we call it the old money style, it's just boring. But on the other hand, it's also so easy to copy. And then so that's another example, because for example, Zara right now in Chinese in China, they have a nickname called Zaro. Why? Because everything that the Ro did is Zara is pretty much doing the same aesthetic, and also it's not like the Ro use super premium quality materials. They do some, but it's really the wisdom tax is really insane there. And then so when there are more than one element or content are the same, the style, the cut, or the fabric, and it's only 10% of the price. Not many people will be that stupid, right? It's a simple math.
Yeah. And so that goes into, we won't unpick the brand strategies here, but that's something that we're even advising our luxury clients on is, you can be luxury, you can be a high price point, but just make sure you've built in why you're at that price point. And it's either through the major brand association and incredible events and access and exclusivity, or it's through being really explicit about your materials and these kind of things. Moving on in the interest of time, I guess we touched on this briefly. We spoke about Chinese brands. So, if Chinese consumers are the most demanding and sort of rational in the world, does this mean that Chinese brands could be Pop Mart, could be DJI, could be BYD? Does this mean that Chinese brands, because of the domestic market, are then actually better prepared to succeed in Western markets? So are we starting to see that happen, Adam?
Yeah, as you know, I'm one of the biggest proponents of Chinese and Asian brands starting to take share globally. And I think they've had the best possible training over the last 20 years. The evolution from being considered poor quality even by their own domestic consumers to actually being the leaders in categories you would never have imagined. Could you ever have imagined that Nike and Adidas would be beaten by Antar and Li-Ning in running shoes? Could you have imagined that two brands you've probably never heard of in Cannes and Proya are beating Estee Lauder and L'Oreal in skincare? Absolutely not. And I think these brands have really worked hard, particularly over the last 10 years, to become the most innovative, certainly the fastest to market, with really high quality that is superior to anything else that global brands are producing in many ways. And of course, because they own the value chain, they're able to offer it at better price points. And I think, you know, the most rational thing of all is that Chinese consumers are now starting to buy Chinese brands as they start to think about the fact that they're getting superior product for low prices. And global consumers are even more rational in their consumption. And if you look at Europe and you look at inflation, as you mentioned, and you look at the cost of living overall, I think it's going to become a natural choice to look for better value for money. And EV is an amazing example of that. I don't think you can go 100 meters down the road here in London and not see a Chinese manufactured car. Everyone knows about BYD, but I have at least 3 friends who have recently made a choice to ditch their ludicrously expensive global brand and buy a JQ or buy a Li Peng motor. And, you know, this is going to happen across more and more categories. You know, I look at the outdoor apparel category we were talking about before, Arc'teryx. Look at brands like Kailas. Look at brands like Pelliot, even Camel, who are already very strong here. And I think that, yes, Chinese brands are very well placed to capitalize on this. And I think that stigma that probably still exists amongst quite a large proportion of the population around poor quality and counterfeit is very quickly going to disappear. And yeah, I do see a very strong future for Asian Chinese brands over here. I mean, you can certainly see in electronics as well.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting time because some Chinese brands that have forward-thinking executives that have potential like staff that have been educated overseas, and then they bring a uniquely Chinese way of doing the product, but combined with the knowledge of UK, Germany, US markets, are the ones that are extremely well placed to capitalize on this. There are still some things that they need to overcome. You see some pretty awful digital marketing and some pretty awful e-commerce experiences from some, but also excellent versions of that from some Chinese brands. So we are definitely entering that era where the rational and very value-driven Chinese consumer has created domestic competition in China, which is more efficient, higher performance, better pricing than many other brands. And those brands are now set to compete on a global scale because actually the innovation hasn't kept up pace in certain sectors and certain markets. So just to wrap up this section, this isn't just about downgrading and spending less, it's about value maximization. So Chinese consumer is definitely still spending. They've just stopped paying that brand tax for logos that don't offer functional value. Okay, so last topic for today is around AI innovation. So, of course, AI is going to be a topic that we return to time and again. Today, we're really talking about that new frontier of marketing and entertainment, the synthetic workforce. So while in Western markets, there's a lot of debates around the ethics of AI, Chinese platforms are pretty busy just deploying AI at scale to create things like influencers and hosts that never sleep. So I found the most recent thing I saw in this space was really interesting from Warner Music Group, where we're going beyond kind of just influencers, but they have released their first all AI pop track created by Wu Aihua. I watched the music video, heard the song. Song's fine. It's passable. It's a mixture of current pop, rap, K-pop, things that you might imagine if you're just ingesting the musical world and trying to give the zeitgeist right now. The video I thought was kind of awesome. Looks a bit like a modern take on an old Golden Harvest Kung Fu film that I used to love so much. So I guess the key thing here is, can and do consumers actually build an emotional connection with these kind of AI avatars, or is it just a novelty? Will it be a bubble? Will it pass? And can AI really get to that sort of trust factor with a human star or a KOL?
I think, can human really build emotional connection with an AI avatar or influencer? I think on human level, and also like speaking from Asian point of view, of course you can, because before AI, if we look at like anime, right, and also like what's the Japanese one? It's called 初音未来. So we had those virtual personality already, and then who has like huge following, and then some fans were even so crazy that pretend that he's marrying her and host a huge wedding in Japan. There's even a term like that in Japan. No, 御宅族. I forgot to pronounce that in Japan. And then so this format, this kind of like you don't have to be a real person as long as you give me the emotional value that I need and also the emotional connection that I have in mind. Of course, it would work, but with value, because value is like, what are you offering? Like, So, for example, if it's AI, then if it's an influencer, is that influencer for everyone or influencer for just yourself? And what are you bringing? And also, what is your story? So all of that, it needs to be thought out. Because why people are so attached to anime is because escapism is one thing, but also because that fits or meets some criteria in our mindset. So that's why we're so invested in that, right? But currently, I haven't seen any AI, let's say influencers or like Avatar that has achieved that because what I see that many try to do, because I think there were some fashion AI influencer and by some big names already. But what they're trying to do is just like to use AI to create an influencer that looks like any other influencers in China. Then what's the point, right? Because you are AI, your ability is much beyond what human can do, then do something different instead of pretending it's human, because that is easy to spot, right? And then also that's immediately trigger people because I know you're fake, but you're pretending to be a human, then
Right.
what's the point here? Virtual relationship and all of this, of course, has huge market. That's why also other games like 恋与制作人, like those incubating games that you have multiple boyfriends, has multiple different occupation in this phone app that works in China.
What do you think is that hook and what's the difference there? Because I agree, actually. If you train AI on everything that's out there and it produces something that's like everything out there, I use the reference to the music. So, the music video, it's fine. You could play it on any radio station, but it really did feel like the level average of lots of things that are really popular right now. So if you get that with an influencer, then, I mean, aren't people influenced by something that stands out? And is AI potentially then creating just I guess, a mediocre version of everything else that's out there?
Exactly, because AI currently, it's just what I've seen. There are many of those like so-called general averaged output by AI because it is the average of collected data from everyone. And then so that's why like using AI just to fit it into a traditional or like an occupation or position that already was there, that won't work, I think. But music videos. And so the 无爱花 from Warner Brothers, like that one was quite like refreshing to me because at first I was like, is this 样板戏 or like 70s, 80s Hong Kong? It cannot tell, but then somehow it feels fun. But you see that there's still a person prompting and also curating this whole thing, and then that is like understood and also accepted by many Chinese. Another very famous rapper from China, Air 艾热, so he also just released his the first album that like music videos and everything he worked with AI, and then to produce the visuals and also some lyrics as well, but voice is still his own voice, but of course AI can use his voice to create much more. So I think the difference here is that the AI topic, like Chinese are not talking about the so-called moral ground behind AI, is because I think it's very obvious to us that it's a tool. We are the curator, we prompt it, and then it's like back then you use a pen and then you use water oil and then you use laptop. Now it's just a new tool, but it's still your thinking. But now the gap will be better, right? So your idea, if you have really good idea, then this tool can accelerate it. If not, then it's just going to still be mediocre. But you are still the reviewer and curator of behind everything. Whereas in the West, people are arguing that's like if you use AI to create a music video, then you are just a director and then the creator is the AI. And I was like, it's too philosophical suddenly.
Well, let's go from the philosophical to the commercial, Adam, because if you're going to create AI humans or AI avatars, then digital live streams, live streaming has taken off massively in China over the last 5-6 years now. It's very much embedded into how to sell, and AI live streamers are already embedded in China. They cost a fraction of a human doing the same job. Looks like a no-brainer for ROI. Are there risks there? Do brands sort of have risks that they're taking when the face of the company on these channels is actually just a generated algorithm?
In essence, yes. I think what's real and what's not real is a question we're all probably asking as we see these things visually, and it's only going to become smarter and smarter. However, I think, yeah, as I said, that there is a risk, and the risk is authenticity. I think humans still crave real human authentic interaction and storytelling. And yes, I think AI will be brilliant for automation of more technical questions that are repetitive. And I think that's where it could work really well. But in terms of that brand experience and storytelling, I still think there's going to need to be a balance. I don't know, I was thinking about this, and perhaps, who's going to be online at 2 o'clock in the morning looking for those more technical details? That's probably a great time to use an AI digital live streamer. But, prime evening time storytelling, that's probably where you want to bring in someone that is genuinely authentic and real to the brand. And you will know that. People will know that. I think even these days, there are new regulations that have just come in where you have to declare who or what things are. And there's a risk of becoming homogenous and samey to other brands as well. So yeah, it's all about authenticity, I think.
And what's really fascinating when we visited live streaming studios from TPs and e-commerce providers in China, and what's really fascinating there was actually the almost pop idol approach that they've been taking, where there's young, good-looking graduates from universities. They want a career as an influencer or a live streamer, and they're working like eight-hour shifts to sell products. And interestingly, the people we're speaking to there have said one of the challenges is these people get big around a certain brand, and then they sort of go somewhere else and they sort of take their following with them.
Yeah.
Now that's a human, and they actually build personal interaction. Are we at the stage yet where people get that from the digital influencer or digital live streamer generated with AI? Possibly not. Again, we're at a sort of interesting time for that. But I think those, China loves a pop idol approach. Came over from Korea, came over from, all kinds of places where the pop factory of this person has started off somewhere and has really kind of grown. There's a human story there. And I think that's a really great way to get people to kind of buy into your brand. Just staying on AI for the final question, there's other applications of AI. So we started off by saying China is very good at deploying. So if, the West is debating the ethics and there's a certain amount of application, China is just deploy, and make practical uses out of AI. So let's talk humanoid robots. I mean, it's something that Mr. Musk wants to do. It seems like the tech and the innovation and the investment in humanoid robots is much, much stronger in China. So there's the physical item that's being built to look like a human, and then there's the AI kind of models that are powering it. Is 2026 going to be the year that we actually see these kind of working in factories and homes, or is this just a kind of hype area like metaverse, NFTs, etc.?
I think before that topic, the difference between, let's say, US and also China right now, like two of the largest AI players in the global market, the difference is that US is an open source thing. Everybody can do something with AI, and then there's not much regulation, and they are arguing about like copyright or like or how to morally use AI and stuff like that. Whereas in China, because it's centralized, and then so it's not everyone can use AI. So the government already said in what sector you can deploy AI. And then that is I think that is the biggest difference. And then so that's why in China you see like people immediately like embrace the AI that we can use. It's because it's already filtered by the government, and then nobody can do beyond certain level. And then so the robot and then powered by AI and actually deployed into factory and stuff. I think this one needs to be tied to see what's it called, the employment rate in China, and also the what sector that the government is trying to push and to have huge growth, and also just to have like higher and increase, and also to go global. So that is the linkage that we can view here.
Well, could we tie that back then to our sort of aging demographic topic? Because, the needs of an aging sort of 80-year-old living in a tier 1, tier 2 city in China would be to have help around the home. But the problem is there's not enough younger people to come in and do those jobs, let alone to kind of support enough the sort of aging pyramid. So a humanoid robot potentially, we talked about the demographic dividend is not there anymore, but are we going to see armies of humanoid robots that are actually helping the aging population? And is that a way that China might actually solve that demographic challenge?
That would be, I can't, of course, there are tons of reasons to say no to, but I see also tons of reason to even the government to say yes, that's a good thing, especially because I am a single child policy generation. So what really scares me is that because my parents right now, both of them are retired, legally retired. They met that age already, even though in European market, it's still young, but in China, it's already retired age.
Well, they can go and get their free pregnancy help based on our initial topic.
That's like if I think right now they're done with it. They're like, yeah, you don't even have child because I don't want to spend time with like one more baby. But yeah, that's the kind of, but sometimes it really scares me to think about when they get old, because I have two of them and just one of me. And then one of them get really sick or both of them get really sick. Then it's just all down on me to take care of them. I know this sounds a bit bizarre maybe to Western society, but in China, it's really difficult to not be there for your parents when they really need you, because family is really, really important. And no matter good or bad, it's your blood. And then so it will come to a point that I have to physically be there to take care of them, or like to make sure that everything is ready for them. And then also that generation, when they get old, they tend to really behave like baby. It's some historical reason that we're not going to go there. So if there's going to be a robot who can cook, who can clean, and who can maybe make them laugh once in a while, or who can listen to them complain without fighting back, because that's what we could do, right? It would be amazing. And also it would solve for example, we don't have enough pension house, and actually the pension fund is also like, it's another topic. So I think from my humble opinion, I think it's a great way to deal with my generation's upcoming difficulty.
Well, Fan, I've just checked, and the unitary G1 is about $16,000. So I guess it depends the value you put on a humanoid robot helping your parents. But I see the application there, and I don't know quite what their tolerance is for dealing with the discussions and complaints that the older generation may have. I'm sure our parents feel exactly the same way about bringing us up. So if they can build that into the large language model, that might make sense. And I've lost track of the number of times I've been amazed by something that I've seen on the streets of China. I don't think it's going to be long before we see elderly people being helped around, hosted, pushed in their wheelchairs by humanoid robots in China. And that will be the headlines in the West. That will be a real moment when that starts to happen. And I think the size and scale and the investment, there's a government fund investing 120 billion euros into this area specifically. And that's also kind of driving the private enterprises into further innovation and further growth. So you can see why it's happening. And I think actually, if anyone hasn't checked out some of the videos of the performance of Chinese robots, please do. Obviously, those businesses put their best videos forward, and there's some interesting ones out there. There are some more practical reviews of people trying to recode robots and train them. So it's worth looking at. But I think we're not far off this becoming a practical reality.
Yeah. And they have to play mahjong. They have to learn. There are some key essential that those robots need to learn. Cooking is one thing. Play mahjong is another thing. They don't need to talk about society. They cannot talk about politics, but they have to be able to play mahjong and let the elderly win. So it's not just know how to play mahjong, but know how to lose without seemingly losing intentionally. That's a skill.
That's a key point. That's how we'll know the robots are really taking over, when they rebel around the mahjong table.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's wrap it there. Adam and Fan, fantastic. So all the executives listening, the demographics are shrinking, but the quality of the China market is maturing. Consumers definitely aren't vanishing. They're just demanding extreme value. And if you aren't using AI to meet that demand efficiently, a local competitor will. So as executives, we need to stop waiting for the old China to come back and start building for this new one. Adam and Fan, thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and just before we go, our team at Hotpot are very much foodies, so it would be remiss of us not to grab a few minutes just to talk through one of the most wonderful things about Chinese culture, the food. So, Anne, what have you eaten or discovered or cooked or rediscovered this month, or deeply missed from Chinese cuisine?
First of all, what I discovered this month is that there's a newly opened Chinese restaurant in Vienna. Someone really wants to do it right. And that's actually very touching, because some Chinese restaurant, they don't care about the experience, and then the food is good, then don't care about the chair, right? But this one is really doing it right. And then so it's called Chili Melody. Can we do advertising here? But there's one dish. It's 双椒毛肚. So it's 小米辣, so it's the red chili pepper, the very spicy one, and then the green chili pepper, also the very spicy one, but also the 毛肚 is the stomach of beef, and then slice them, and then also cooked in this special yet very classic Sichuan sauce. It's so spicy. You're definitely gonna have a stomach ache afterwards or the day after, even for me, because it's normal to have diarrhea for us, but it's so good and it's so worth it.
All right, I was going to ask, because shuangjiao I know is a Hunan thing, but I guess also a Sichuan.
Yeah, 云贵川不分家.
Bufenjia, okay, yeah.
Or we can also count Hunan in, because we're the spicy region.
Fair enough. Well, everyone on Hotpot is in the spicy region by association, I think. Adam, anything on your side?
Yeah, I was thinking about our China immersion trips. So we take our clients to China to really experience the culture firsthand and move things forward, obviously from a business perspective. And a key part of that is clearly having a tremendous culinary experience. And every time I do a trip briefing, I say, "Do you like Chinese food?" Yeah, love Chinese food. And I say, "What is Chinese food?" And it's, westernized Chinese food. And they haven't had the opportunity to try some of the incredible things that are available from very different provinces in China. Yeah, they go out there, they have something from Sichuan, something from Hunan, they'll have Beijing Kaoya, Beijing duck, and ultimately they'll realize that, that there's real Chinese food and there's Chinese food, and they come back a lot more enlightened. And it always reminds me of my first experience in Ningbo. And I was desperate to find sweet and sour chicken, which is one of those like favorite dishes. And now if I go to China, I wouldn't dare ask for something like that because it's just not really on the menu for me. But yeah, I think it's a great part of the trips that we run. And I know that it enlightens a lot of people as to a really key part of Chinese culture.
Also, another point I want to echo here is that actually it's always bizarre to me that even I sometimes when I speak English, I say Chinese food, but we're not going to say European food, right? It's either Italian or British food
Yeah.
or French. But
Don't say British food like that, Fan. Come on. British food has amazing culinary status. It may not be famous, but it definitely exists. But I take your point.
It may actually evolve in line with the topic we talked about before. There's some incredible local dialects, local places to go and eat here now.
then I think that's the shared character of British food and Chinese food, which is it's underestimated. British food is definitely underestimated by many people with weird stereotype, and so whereas Chinese food is also underestimated by categorize it into one cuisine. It's not. So it's like Sichuan, Beijing, Shanghai. It's all different. So we need to make them both good.
On that note, the one thing that grabbed me, I was scrolling Instagram the other day, which I try not to do too much, but I was just arrested in my feed by this British guy who was based in Heilongjiang. I can't remember which city, but far, far northeast, very, very cold China at this time of year. And he was it looks like a street that I remember from my time in Beijing before a lot of things got bulldozed, but there's a lot going on. It's first thing in the morning, it's freezing cold, and there's all these stalls out there serving various breakfast items. I recognize a lot of them, but he went and got something called a danrou bao, so a basically egg meat bun. And there's every flavor and version of these out there, but this one I'd not seen before, where it's kind of like a hot plate with sort of pockets in it, and then in goes an egg, and then in goes some pork mince, and in goes some xiangcai, so coriander and spring onions. It gets flipped over, comes out, and it's got kind of a bready covering, and then gets covered in really spicy sauce, really kind of xian, savory sauce, and handed to you like scalding hot in a tiny little plastic bag. And I just thought it looked absolutely amazing. It ended up looking a bit like a sausage egg McMuffin, but made by a street vendor and for 3 kwai. And he got 3 of them for 9 kwai. He was taking one back to his wife. And it was just great to see the characters. And I miss really that experience from living in Beijing. Various delicious egg and meat-based breakfast stuffs. All right. Thanks, everyone. That's a wrap for this month.
Thank you.
Very good.
So that wraps up this session. We promised you the strategic edge at the start of the hour, but insight without action is just noise. So to get in touch with the Hotpot team for a discussion of how to apply these learnings, please head over to our website, hotpotagency.com, or hit the link in our show notes below. And if you're looking for deeper insights to apply directly to your own roadmap and you want to see the full data, charts, and deeper analysis, don't forget our China-specific deep dive resource, the China Playbook. Again, that link is in our show notes below this episode. I'm Jonathan Trevor Smith. Keep looking beyond the headlines, and we'll see you next month at the Hotpot table.